It's over, Johnny. It's over!
Nothing is over! Nothing! You just don't turn it off!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Cine-Files. I am writer, producer, and host, the outlaw John Roca.
And I am filmmaker and directing instructor Steve Morris.
And we are continuing our conversation of First Blood. This is part two of our conversation. You know, Steve, been thinking a lot about after the end of part one of our conversation, how much this film really does have so much to say about our world still, and still honors and respects so much of the story here, even though they've made some changes about what was going on here for so many people who are Vietnam veterans coming back to the States. And so I'm just really moved by how much we were able to explore in mine in part one.
I totally agree. And I think the two things about this film, the first is that people talk about this as like a great action movie, one of the great action movies of the 80s. And it's true, this is a great action movie, but to me, really tonally, this is a drama with great action in it, not an action movie that can be dramatic. And the other thing I would say is I think the biggest things about it is its silence, particularly the silence of John Rambo, and the restraint, his restraint. Those are the critical things that elevate this movie for me.
Yeah, and we're going to find out the man who created this silence and this restraint within Rambo. We're going to get to know him even more as we go along here in part two of our discussion in First Blood, and that's Colonel Troutman, the great Richard Crenna playing Colonel Troutman. So, Steve, are you ready to dive in?
I'm ready. I'm hidden out in the mountains. I've got some wild boar or something I'm eating. I'm ready to survive, and I'm ready to fight back, John.
All right, it's funny you bring up a wild boar because that's exactly where we're starting. When we left off, Rambo jumps out of the tree, kills a wild boar, and we see him take a leg into the cave, and then later on he is cooking it and eating it over a fire. And I'll tell you this, the same Navy SEAL who was doing the choreography for those fights down in the basement of or the lower level of the sheriff's office, Stallone asked him, hey, can Rambo jump down and do this? And he said, that is ridiculous. The only thing you'd be able to kill from that height is a jackrabbit. And so he added it anyway. He asked to be added in anyway, and he put it in the movie. So you have that section there with him killing a wild boar. Steve, have you ever killed any animal and eaten it as a hunter or any sense of that? Have you ever done anything like that? I know there are people who do that, and maybe some of our listeners have done that in the past. What about you?
I have fished, and I have killed a fish and eaten it. I have killed a rat that was trapped in a rat trap and not dead, and I put it out of its misery, which was strangely hard to do.
It is.
That was hard to do. And I've certainly eaten food that was hunted by hunters that I was friends with who had brought it back. But no. Oh, no, wait. Oh, I have a different story.
Okay.
It's still a fish, but I should tell this story, which is, so when I did the shark documentaries, I'm with these free divers who are world-class spear fishermen. And so there weren't any sharks around, and said, we're just going to do some spear fishing. So they went down, and I was running the boat. So I'm on the Zodiac while these guys are diving down. They kill a 80-pound tuna.
Yeah.
They bring the 80-pound tuna up into the Zodiac. They butcher him. You know, he's still alive when he gets in the Zodiac. They butcher him in the Zodiac. I'm not making this up. They said, Steve, this is your first time doing this, right? I'm like, yeah, this is my first time. Maybe this was a joke they played on me. Maybe it wasn't. But they pulled out its still beating heart. Oh, I'm not making this up. Cut it into strips and handed me to eat some raw tuna heart that had been beating literally seconds before.
Oof.
So I have done that.
Wow.
It tasted very irony.
Yes, as well it should. And that would have been an interesting element to add to Temple of Doom if we got to that section of the film for sure. But let's head back into Hope, Washington, and into this compound that's been set up here with the state police and the National Guard and the sheriff's there with Teasle. We see Teasle, he has a walkie-talkie, and then we see the state police trying to get in contact with Rambo.
If you're listening, Rambo, here's your situation. You are surrounded. Every possible exit has been blocked. Every highway, every road, every fire break. You have our word that your services to your country will be taken into consideration and you will receive fair treatment.
Teasle wants Troutman to talk to Rambo and then says some cocky stuff like, maybe you'll spare our lives while you pinpoint his location.
At least we'll get a radio fix on his position, if you don't mind setting him up for us.
Setting him up for you. That's like bringing the pigeons to the cat.
What a great line there. Troutman reaches out to Rambo over the radio.
Copy leader to Raven. Talk to me, Johnny.
He uses code to prove that it's him. Rambo is hesitant. We see Stallone's performance there. He's hesitant. He's confused to hear this voice because that's probably the last voice he thought he would hear over the radio. And we find out why in just a second, because here goes Troutman laying out everybody who served on Baker team.
Rambo, Mesner, Ortega, Coletta, Jorgensen, Danforth, Barry, Krakauer. Confirmed.
And there's this long silence. You just mentioned the idea of silence here in this movie. And then all of a sudden,
They're all gone, sir.
It's him. Get on it.
Rambo, are you all right? Over.
Baker team, they're all dead, sir.
Not Delmore Barry. He made it.
Barry's gone too, sir.
and they end up pinpointing the fact that he is in the northwest of that particular area. And of course, they're in the northwest of the United States, but in the northwest of that area, Rambo wants to know where Troutman came from.
Frank.
I tried to get in touch with you, but the guys at Bragg never knew where to find you.
And Troutman responds with some malarkey about they have him shining a seat in Washington with his ass. And Troutman says to Rambo,
Well, look, John, we can't have you running around out there wasting friendly civilians.
There are no friendly civilians.
Well, I'm your friend, Johnny.
and he plays on all the stuff they did together in Vietnam and how he covered his ass there. And Troutman plays the loyalty card.
Seems like bailing you out of trouble is getting to be a lifetime job for me.
There wouldn't be no trouble except for that king shit cup.
And Teasle registers that comment and then walks away. And Troutman counters that he did some pushing of his own. And Rambo responds with the title of the film.
They drew first blood, not me.
And then goes radio silent. So, Steve, what an interesting interaction we have here. The first interaction between Troutman and Rambo. Troutman there trying to use all the tactics to get Rambo to come back. Rambo pushing back and then even saying, I tried to find you, but somehow they never let me find you, or you never responded back to my attempts to come and find you. Now, all of a sudden, you're showing up here in this situation. So this is also a bit of a commentary on how these people created these soldiers to do these things and then didn't want the responsibility of what they created to come back at them in civilian/military life. So what are your thoughts about this interaction we have between Rambo and Troutman?
So first of all, as I've said many times, I am frequently opposed to using the title of the movie in the movie. It often stands out like a sore thumb.
Right.
Like we were talking about Lee Marvin before, and when he goes, okay, you dirty dozen, that's terrible. I think this one's great. I think this is a great usage because because it's thematic to the film.
Yeah.
It explains a philosophy of the film that I think is really important. So I think that's really good. Going back to Teasle, and then I really want to get into this Troutman relationship because there's a lot here. Yeah. Man, Teasle's a fucking idiot. When he starts joking about he's gonna hurt me, come on. It's like he wiped out all your guys, had a knife to your throat, and you were weeping like a child in his arms, and now you've just gone back into ridiculous denial again. I mean, like, it's really, come on.
Yeah.
Troutman. Okay. I don't know how to get, so I think the moment before he decides to call back on the radio, I think there's so much going on with Rambo's in his head. Mm-hmm. Does he trust Troutman?
I don't think he knows who to trust at this point. And I think in this moment, there is history. And I think if he trusted Troutman fully, he'd have responded quickly. But in the situation and the way it is, and he just heard the state copper telling him what the situation was. And then on the same channel, here comes Troutman. So maybe there's a bit of hesitation on his part, like, well, is he being used? How is he here? What is his purpose? So Rambo, because he's a smart soldier, does all of that thinking quickly to assess the situation before he responds.
See, I think that's true. I definitely think that's true. I would not be surprised if Troutman fucked them over in Vietnam.
100%.
Not just once, but multiple times. They were expendable. They were his, elite shock troops, and he put them into situations where men did die. And this is the thing, and this is what's so interesting, and why I think it is great that it's Richard Crenna and not some of these other actors, not even the Milton Berle, Jackie Mason one, but but not Kirk Douglas, not some of the other people that were mentioned, or Clint Eastwood, because there's such an ambiguity in his character, and I think that John Rambo at this moment he is an incredibly smart soldier, but I think he's totally lost.
Yes.
I think he doesn't know what to do. I mean, he knows how to fight, and he certainly will keep fighting because that's what he does, and he will, stay alive, but he doesn't know where he's supposed to go in his life. And now he hears this voice of, in my mind, a person who he has damn good reason to hate.
Right.
But it's also a voice that he recognizes of his world, that makes the world make sense.
Yeah. And it's in a way, you could argue, as Steve, we've gotten into cult leaders and cult documentaries through COVID. People really, because there's a 6-episode series that's out now on Netflix. It's narrated by Peter Dinklage, exploring how people become cult leaders and using all the different examples. And it's a fascinating, I'm not finished with it, but I'm 2 episodes in, it's fascinating. But yeah, in a lot of areas of our lives, there are cult leader adjacent relationships that we get into. And the military is one of them, and especially special forces, because people like Colonel Troutman get young men who are still underdeveloped in their minds, emotionally underdeveloped, and they twist them and mold them to be the things that they need. But then they don't want the responsibility of what they've created to be something that they have to constantly monitor. They don't figure that out. So they try to excommunicate them or bar them from coming close to them or put walls up. And we see it all the time. And then when they need them, they go and manipulate the situation, and they immediately bring up, well, you owe me for this and you owe me for that. I have to say, in my personal life, I've had that experience on a couple of occasions where someone, because they helped you or they opened a door for you, they think you owe them for the rest of your life. And the only thing you ever owe somebody who helps you out is your best effort. That's it. Loyalty is something that's fabricated in the moment, and you may want loyalty, you may respect loyalty, so you give that back, but it's not a requirement of the situation, and it never should be. Someone should be opening a door for you because they believe in you and trust you and want you to do well, and here's an opportunity for you to do well. But too many people use that as a reason to be able to control you. And we see this with Troutman, that when Rambo is resisting him, he immediately goes into, look, saving your ass is getting to be a lifetime job, essentially implying, I have done for you so many things. Why aren't you willing to do what I tell you to do in this moment? So I like that there's a shifting dynamic in this relationship. And it, as you said, Steve, I think he screwed him over in Vietnam. I think he ignored him at Fort Bragg. And I think Rambo knew, but he hasn't quite come to terms with that. And later, when he explodes on Troutman in that store, I think that's Rambo taking power back in that relationship. But this is the beginnings of seeing that there's an issue here between them, even though there's a strong relationship.
It's such a complicated thing, and it's funny. This is a conversation you and I have had a bit off mic, but I didn't quite connect it to Troutman until you were just speaking. But that person in my life is Hoover. From the documentaries. I was just talking about the shark documentary, and he, not through things like loyalty, that wasn't his technique, but he managed to gather around him this group of really talented, interesting, complicated people, and got us all to work for him in situations that weren't always very healthy. And only now are me and these other guys, none of we only know each other through Hoover, are now like comparing notes and figuring out like, oh, that's how he manipulated me. Oh, that's why we did. Oh, this was and I only knew a piece of the situation that was going on. And then I talked to Chip, or I talked to, one of these other guys, and go like, oh shit. And Troutman, I think, is a genius user. You know what I mean? Like he knows how to spot a person who could be a John Rambo. He knows how to get them trained to be a John Rambo. He knows how to use them to achieve whatever military ends he needs. And then he fucking dumps him. I think he went, John Rambo's all used up. He's no longer safe. He's no longer useful, and he cuts him loose and doesn't give him another thought until this moment right now.
Well, the fact that he doesn't know that Delmore Berry is dead, right? Yeah. I think that tells you everything you need to know. He's not keeping tabs on the people that he trained and commanded in war.
He's all finished, Colonel. Got a real good fix on him, though. Come first light, I'm gonna put every man I got up on that ridge. Now we'll get him my way.
And then, Steve, we cut to a bunch of dopey National Guard guys walking along the water. And to me, I said, this is like watching old school stormtroopers from the original series of Star Wars. And it's true. And listen, let me tell you something, a military window. National Guards people, when I was in the military, were absolutely the butt of jokes and the butt of ridicule. But certainly, National Guard people do wonderful stuff in a number of communities and help people during crises when stuff's happening in their town. So this is played up because this is the approach of the movie. But, National Guard people deserve a lot of respect for sure. And that's something I've discovered as I've gotten older and got out of the army. But and just as they walk past all the rocks and the water, after a little bit of a pause, Rambo appears out from under the rocks, having just basically hidden there without them noticing him. We see Rambo run into the woods, and then he comes upon a young kid with a rifle. This is a scary moment, Steve. He disarms the kid, has the knife over the kid, but then lets the kid go, who runs away to his dad. His dad is there with a bunch of other people who are hunters. They shoot at him, which draws the National Guard's attention, and they come running in, whooping it up like a bunch of yahoos.
Now listen to me very carefully. Surround the area with every man you've got, but don't move in. I repeat, don't move in. In fact, don't do anything till I get there. And no shooting.
Then what happens? We cut to the National Guard guys shooting at Rambo, and when Rambo returns their fire, I put their spines get all squishy. And just like those deputies who were just shooting indiscriminately, here they go diving under, and we get them absolutely scared. We hear some funny exchanges with the main National Guard guy, who is Clinton Morgan.
All right, Steve. Yo. I want you and Bruce, head around these trees, go to the front of that mine.
Screw that, Clinton. I ain't going up there.
No way.
None of the dudes want to do what Clinton is telling them to do, which is to go around and to surprise Rambo and do all of this stuff. So Clinton, in desperation, brings up Earl with the rocket launcher, Steve, and Earl and Rambo's right behind a wall here inside the mine, seeing all of this happen, hearing all of this happen. Earl brings up the rocket launcher and shoots it into the mine. And I wrote, these incompetent buffoons, I guess, do one thing right. Earl is happy for now, even yells, bullseye, and Rambo takes off into the mine. So what is your impression on the National Guard, guys? What is your impression with this entire sequence? And they almost do stupidly kill Rambo or clumsily kill Rambo, even though they're not intending to kill Rambo. What are your thoughts on all this?
So first of all, with the making the same disclaimer that you made of their great National Guardsmen are people that are serving their country and do all sorts of great things. And I'm sure there are, like in anything else, the entire range of competence as there is in any organization. That being said, these guys are hilarious. It's by the way, this is not in the book.
Thank God this is not in the book.
And I think what I think is so great about it is what this movie is doing is it's showing you the levels. Yeah. Is that it's saying, look, anybody can be carrying a gun or a weapon or be in one of these situations. Yeah. And at the highest level, you have John Rambo, who is trained in every possible way and has the discipline and has the skills and has the physique and has the willingness and the courage to be a truly, truly dangerous dude. Yeah. And then you have these steps down like Galt and Teasle. And it's not, they are skilled. Yeah. Like if they were chasing someone who wasn't a John Rambo into the woods, they probably would have gotten him without too much trouble. Right. Because they have some training. And then you get to the National Guard, which are clearly weekend warriors. They're clearly, and they think that, well, I'm in the outfit and I have the weapon. Yeah. Therefore, I must be a badass, and I did some training. And I mean, like the way that they're just totally casually and carelessly opening fire. They have no idea where Rambo actually is. They don't have much of a chance to hit him. And all of the bickering back and forth and like, I don't want to go do that. Well, let's get the rocket launcher. It's all, I think it is genuinely funny. Yeah. And this is a heavy fucking movie. So this is like, this is like in the Scottish play having the gravedigger or the porter in the Scottish play. It's like we needed a moment that was sort of lighter in the midst of all this action.
I agree. It keeps the balance in the movie, right? Because if this was a movie like based on the book, there would be nothing like this. And if there was, it would be like one quick exchange because it's a much more violent film if we adhere to what's fully going on in the book. Because we know that Rambo has a forgiving personality, a softer person, not so softer, empathetic personality, you can get away with this kind of jokey moment in the middle, or jokey scenes in the middle of the movie, which continues. And by the way, the guy who is the head of the National Guard, that is played by Patrick Stack. He is Timothy Stack's brother, and I don't know if you guys remember who Timothy Stack is, but fantastic character actor, very funny comedic actor. He was the lead in Son of the Beach, and he also was recently in My Name is Earl as TV's Tim Stack. So this is a very funny guy. So clearly funniness runs in the family with both of these guys, which I think is really funny. So we cut back here and into a helicopter and landing here, and out of the helicopter comes Teasle, Troutman, and State Police Dave. Teasle runs up as the National Guard idiots are taking pictures of themselves, essentially trying to replicate the Iwo Jima, the very famous Iwo Jima picture from World War II.
All right, Nick, one more for Soldier of Fortune.
Soldier of Fortune?
Yeah, I don't know.
Damn it! What the hell do you think this is? Some kind of a circus? Get the hell out of here!
Teasle dresses down Clinton, and then tells him to clean up the mess.
Will, come on, I gotta be back at the drugstore tomorrow.
And you better get started right away, Clinton.
And then we cut to Rambo in the dark lighting a match. So he's still alive, Steve. He lights up some of the burlap, wraps it around a stick. Teasle and Troutman have another exchange about Rambo.
Here lies John Rambo, winner of the Congressional Medal of Honor, survivor of countless incursions behind enemy lines, killed for vagrancy in Jerkwater, USA.
Now, don't give me any of that crap, Troutman. You think Rambo was the only guy who had a tough time in Vietnam? He killed a police officer, for Christ's sake.
And maybe he does believe Rambo killed him because he didn't see it, but certainly we know that it's not 100% the truth. Then Teasle goes full rage mode at Troutman, and as State Police Steve looks on to all of this. And then we go back to Rambo, who's in the mine, using the fire, looking for more gasoline to keep the light going. Troutman walks up after this exchange with Teasle by himself, and he sees the smoke coming out, and we have a close-up on his face, and there's a smirk on his face because he knows his boy is still alive.
Well, this begs the question. Why doesn't he tell Teasle?
I think because, like most military guys, he has his own agenda. And in his mind, his agenda is to get his boy out of there alive and protected by the United States government and not let him get arrested by Teasle. I think that's his, and by the state police. I think that's his goal at this point. Of course, by the end, he is arrested by the state police. But at this point, he's trying to get his boy out of there with as little kerfuffle as possible.
There's also do you remember the moment it's funny, it's with another of our potential actors in First Blood, but George C. Scott in Strangelove, where he's talking about how the planes are going to attack, and he gets really excited because even though the whole point is to stop those planes from dropping the bomb on Russia, there's some part of George C. Scott's character that loves the Air Force and wants them to do it.
If the pilot's good, see, I mean, if he's really sharp, he can barrel that baby in so low. I mean, you ought to see it sometime. It's a sight. A big plane like a 52. Vroom! It's jet exhaust frying chickens in the barnyard.
Yeah, but has he got a chance?
Has he got a chance?
I think Troutman, even though he knows all the fucked up things that Rambo could do, I think he's like, there's my guy, you know? There's that pride in him. Even though, and he'll fuck over Rambo without a question.
Yeah.
But there's still pride in him.
Yeah. It's like your family, right? No one can insult your family. You can insult your family, but no one can insult your family, right? It's that old kind of mentality on that.
Yep.
All right. So we got to Rambo, who is walking through the water, falling from above in the mine. His torch is leading the way. Then he kind of stumbles through an opening here and falls down and re-injures his arm. We cut back to Will Teasle back at the station there, and he is not happy because it seems like the National Guard have killed Rambo, and Teasle didn't get his opportunity to take out revenge on Rambo for Galt's death and for the embarrassment that he feels Rambo put him through. So he's in that office just completely unhappy. We go back to Rambo walking through the mine as it gets tighter and tighter. And then we start to see, Steve, what is one of my greatest fears, which I don't think I've talked about on the show, rats hanging around on the side here. And as he's walking through it, all of a sudden these rats come out from the water and start to bite him and jump on his back. Now, from what I understand, these were actual rats. And from what I understand, what I've read, Stallone went to the hospital for rat bites on more than one occasion during the filming of this movie. By the way, he's getting paid $2 million. He asked for 3.5, but he's getting paid 2, and the producers are telling me he can make the 1.5 million afterwards. I don't know if I could walk through a river of rats, Steve, for $2 million. But what do you think about this scene here? We had snakes with Indiana a year before when this movie came out, and here we have rats with Rambo.
So it's funny. I remember when we did Last Crusade, because there's the whole rat sequence in Last Crusade.
Yes, right.
That they went through, like they actually bred, I think, all of those rats specifically for Last Crusade so they could completely guarantee that they were 100% clean, no diseases, no nothing like that. My guess is they did not do that for this movie.
Oh no, I've got something to tell you about that. But yes, keep going.
It's funny. I also remember when we did the Breakfast Club, and the question came up of, would you show up to school naked for $1 million? And I believe that both you and I said, yes, we would.
Yeah, absolutely. For $1 million. Yes.
But the rats you're staying away from for the $1 million.
That's too far, man. I don't know what I'm going to
totally do
rats. Yeah, Steve, will the $2 million be spent on my therapy, both physically and emotionally?
I'm not judging you. I'm not judging you, John. I am saying, here's my thinking. I once, because I had to record something on video the same day, I had some dental work done without Novocaine.
Oh,
because I couldn't have my mouth numb when I had to go speak.
Wow.
And it hurt. It was very painful, but it wasn't horrible. And I just kind of went, and that's what made me think about it. Is like, well, someone paid me $1 million to go through a horrible thing for several hours. Sure, it'll suck. But I would do it. That's because because it's worth it to me.
Yeah. But rats, dude.
I mean, get it. No, I get my sister had a pet rat, so I grew up with a rat. Yeah.
That's not for me, man. That is not for me.
Respect.
So one of the things that I want to tell you about the rats, there was an animal care representative on the set. The rats were squeezed and hurled against a wall, killed and burned by an actor during the filming again and again between takes, while according to this person, the director and the crew looked on and laughed. The representative was unable to take action because she claimed that the rats belonged to the production company and she did not want to be asked to leave the set. She wrote to the Canadian Council on Animal Care suggesting that something be done. Their response was to wait until the picture was released, and then after it was, she filed the complaint and pointed out the abuse to the Canadian Film Board. So, yeah, rats not really well respected on the set, according to some of the research I did here. Maybe if someone's listening who knew when it was on the set, maybe they could counter this, but that's the research I have, Steve.
So it said an actor was doing this?
Yes, by an actor during the filming. And again, now they didn't specify which actor, but there's only one actor with the rats.
I was going to say, I mean, it has to be Stallone. It can't. Yeah. He literally is the only actor in those scenes.
Right. And you would think they would tell her not to say anything because Stallone is becoming a big name. He's the lead of the film. If she complains, this puts the production back. Would she be able to take the heat of putting a production back? You know,
it has to be Stallone. Everything that you describe about let's wait till it wraps, and you know that if it was a little nobody actor, none of that happens.
Right.
And frankly, on a movie set, a nobody actor who's torturing animals would be fired from the he would be the only person who gets away with doing that is Stallone.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fucked up. I mean, he's also going to the hospital regularly with rat bites.
This is clearly a war that's happening between Stallone and the rats.
The rats drew first blood, John.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Anyway, that's their representative. All right. He eventually gets through the rats situation, comes out the other side. But we cut to a bar, and Troutman is having a drink. And I don't know about you, Steve, but he seems a little drunk, like military drunk. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's got a lot in him, but he can still handle his liquor, but you can tell he's a little drunk. He's got that cigar that he's lit up. And who walks up to have a seat and join him but Teasle?
I don't know. I just feel
like you were cheated out of your chance.
I wanted to kill that kid. Well, I wanted to kill him so bad I could taste it.
Doesn't sit well with that badge.
And he says how Troutman and Rambo got confused in Vietnam. But Troutman says that Teasle gets to go home to his wife in Nice House, which sets Teasle off. And Mr. Apology gets testy again.
Hey, what about you, Colonel? What did you figure out from all of this, huh? I mean, what would you have done with him if he came in? Would you wrap your arms around him, give him a big sloppy kiss? Or would you have blown his brains out?
And this is an interesting question we have, Steve. And I like this scene between the both of them, right? Let's stop here. This is a fascinating conversation between these two guys because you've got Teasle, who is clearly caught up in his man shit that, like, this guy got away before I got a chance to kill him. It should matter only that he's dead and he's not killing or threatening their lives anymore. But Teasle is caught up with this thing of, like, I wanted to do it. And here's Troutman having a drink, who fully knows that Rambo is still alive.
Exactly, yeah.
And having this back and forth with him. And Teasle, who comes in like all apologetic, is testy yet again within seconds or minutes during their interactions about this because Troutman is actually calling him out. Teasle does not have the emotional self-awareness to be like, you're right, it sucks. I wanted to kill him. I'm not going to get a chance to kill him. But here, let me drive you out of the town. Do you need anything? No, it's like, no, what about you guys got confused in Vietnam? So still angry. So, Steve, there isn't the fact that he served in Korea, which is in the book. There isn't Rambo blowing his brains out or dying, rather, which is in the book. But there is allusions to it in the behavior here and in Teasle saying to him, saying to Troutman, would you have hugged Rambo or shot his brains out?
I think the fact that Troutman has this whole conversation knowing that Rambo is actually alive
yes,
is what makes it all so, it's really hard. So Teasle, I understand.
Yes.
Like Teasle is butthurt because of what happened to him. His ego's been damaged. He's living with massive amounts of cognitive dissonance where he just can't accept the fact that he was A, in the wrong, or B, is not actually the tough guy that he thinks he is. And that he's not in control. I mean, I think one of the biggest things, when the way we introduce his character, Teasle believes he is in control.
Yes.
He runs this town. I am doing this job, doing this thing, and I'm in control. And Rambo is evidence that you ain't. And I don't think so even though he comes to apologize because he knows that's the right thing to do on some level, it's so shallow.
Yes.
And then the fact that Troutman, because what I want to know is, what does Troutman think is about to happen?
Yeah.
I think he knows Rambo's alive.
Right.
I think he knows there is a very strong possibility that Rambo could come marching into town and kill 100 people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think he's waiting at the bar because he knows that Rambo's got to go through that mine and it's going to take him a bit to go through that mine. So instead of standing there waiting for him and maybe giving it away that Rambo might still be alive, he goes to the bar to have a drink until the first incident of Rambo coming out of that tunnel happens. Then he knows he's out. Then he's back in the game, So it's an interesting moment that he's willing to go and have a drink and a cigar while he waits for his boy to come out of that tunnel and start killing people, possibly.
I think there is an argument to be made that the actual most evil person in this movie is Troutman.
Now, remember when I talked about the journey of this film being made, one of the first iterations of the script, I think it was Martin Ritt or Frankenheimer, who said that the villain of the piece is actually Colonel Troutman, and that he in one of the scripts that they had done for the book or adapted from the book, both Rambo and Teasle die. Troutman stays alive because he is the villain, and that would fit with the 70s approach to things, as we've seen so many of those movies have the villain or the anti-hero, not anti-hero, I guess, survive at the end of their piece, So interesting thing. As much as we love Michael Corleone, he's a pretty evil guy, as we see by the end of Godfather and Godfather Part 2.
He's super evil, absolutely. Well, and the thing too is, like, Galt is an asshole.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, he is not a good guy. He is a bad guy. He is an asshole, but he is a bad guy in a small town way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, he was a bully, and I'm sure he drinks too much and is, breaks shit at bars, and I'm sure he's done all sorts of shitty things. Teasle is a control freak who believes he's doing the right thing on some level and then ends up doing some really wrong things. Troutman might just be a full-on sociopath because if he does suspect that there's a decent chance that, because who knows how many people, Rambo's capable of killing everyone in this town. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Troutman knows that's a possibility, and he's not telling anyone. And he seems to be enjoying the idea of watching his boy be great at doing what he does. And so if he is just like going, let's just see what happens, this will be interesting.
Yeah.
And of course, and I don't really remember the other movies very well. I've seen, I think, all of them, but Troutman's around, and he's certainly always happy to use John Rambo to further what his own ends are.
Yeah, Troutman's in the second one because he's the one that motivates Rambo to get out of the 8-year prison sentence, which is what he gets at the end of this movie. He's 3 years into his serving a sentence, and Troutman is the one that goes and gets him for that mission. But Troutman is also the one who should have known that Martin Cove was going to turn on them, that Napier was going to turn on them. And so it's an interesting relationship they have. He's a terrible father figure in a lot of ways, but he's the only father figure that Rambo has.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting relation. All right, we cut to Rambo climbing out of the mine after finding a wooden ladder. He comes out and looks over the rocks and sees the National Guard guys cleaning up the mess that Teasle told him to clean up. And he sees these trucks leaving down the road, and he waits and waits and waits, and then jumps on top of one, comes around the side, very similar in a way to Raiders of the Lost Ark, opens the door, comes into the passenger seat, and puts the knife on Cathcart Robert A., who is driving the truck. He reads his dog tags, and then eventually he kicks Cathcart out of the truck when he finds out that the truck is carrying M16s in the back of it. We see Cathcart running along the road, and one of the sheriff's deputies' cars or somebody's car pulls up, and then we cut to the sheriff's office.
Hey, Will, it's Rambo. He's still around.
We cut to a police car hauling ass up there, and then we get into another car chase here, Steve, between Rambo driving that truck and the police car that's behind them. The cops take shots at Rambo, and then he eventually runs them off the road into a parked car that explodes as they flip over. So we may not see Rambo kill people in the movie, but it is a very real possibility that he killed one or two of those cops that were in that car. And then once again, Rambo is back at the bridge, and he comes across that bridge that he walked through to start this all. He comes across the bridge in the army truck right through the state police, destroying those cars. And we get this inspirational music cue, Steve. So I want to stop here. Here is Rambo coming powerfully back into the town, whereas in the beginning of the movie, he is defiantly coming back just by himself walking. This is him coming with an arsenal full of M16s in the back of the truck, and himself now determined to fight everybody in this town. And this is an interesting point. The reason I'm stopping here is because Joseph Campbell has the hero's journey, right? There's 3 stages here. There's the departure stage, the initiation stage, and the return. When Rambo goes off into the woods chased by Teasle, that is the departure from the world he knows in that the real world, and he goes into the forest. The initiation, or all the trials and tribulations, and especially going through that mine, in essence, symbolically going through a rebirth to come out the other side and return, and he is now fully in heroic form. So hearing Jared Goldsmith's score or music cue in that moment when the truck barrels through the state police, I think the film is saying to us, Rambo is the hero of this movie now fully as we go into this town, and we are going to follow his journey here as he takes on Teasle.
So I had never, ever considered applying Joseph Campbell's hero's journey to John Rambo, but it totally works. I think particularly like the going through the mine as the going through the dark place that you have to go, it's Luke Skywalker going in and facing Vader and Empire, like that I think that totally works. I will say something that maybe a lot of people disagree with, which is the action sequences up to Rambo's quote unquote death in the mine.
Yeah.
I think are fantastic, top to bottom. I love the motorcycle car chase. I love him ambushing all the guys in the woods, the stuff with the helicopter, although I find that one stunt kind of ridiculous, but I like all of it. I like all that stuff.
Right.
To me, this stuff going forward as he goes back into the town, and we have the car chase on the way to town, is all at a lesser level, for me. And maybe it's because, as we talked about before, I'm not the revenge guy that you are, and so having him come back in and destroying parts of the town isn't as satisfying to me, but like, and it's still really, really good. but I don't find it as thrilling as I find the first half of the film.
I think this is a great point you bring up, Steve, because as you said, I love revenge films.
Yeah.
But the town didn't screw him over. Teasle.
No.
So there's a little bit of a disconnect here with the actions that Rambo is about to take, because he is going to destroy personal property. He's going to cause big attention. He's going to shoot out power lines. He's going to do all these things that, in essence, mess with citizens of the town.
Yeah.
Right? But you also got to look at it this way. In the military point of view, and look, Oppenheimer is out in theaters now. This idea of civilians paying for what their elected leaders do is an age-old thing in the military and in any war, in any battle. Collateral damage is always citizens who are unfortunately in the line of fire when a war is happening. And in essence, Teasle started a war with Rambo. Rambo returned fire and engaged in the war himself. And now, in essence, a lot of the town folk are going to suffer, not physically, but they're going to suffer at the hands of Rambo as innocent civilians caught up in this war between Teasle and Rambo.
Well, and what I should say is it does totally make sense. The first half is escape and defense.
Yes.
And once he gets, they try to blow him up in the fucking mine, and the state, the National Guard and the state troopers are after him.
Yeah.
Well, now it turns to offense, and the objective becomes Teasle and the police station. Yeah. And he launches a well thought out, tactically supported, step-by-step attack to get to his objective. And so it does totally makes sense.
But I hear you. It does kind of take a little bit of the shine off him as a hero, even though Goldsmith's score here has heroic beats to it when we hear him break through. All right, so let's head to Hope, Washington. Steve, apparently the bridge is a very, very far location away from the town, because suddenly it's nighttime. By the time he gets into town, he comes into the town, he runs the army truck over a couple of gas pumps, sets the gas station on fire. It explodes, and this is all to get Teasle's attention, which it does. We cut to police cars speeding by as Rambo runs into the street now, a la Mel Gibson in Lethal Weapon. The fire blows up all these adjacent cars that are there in some kind of car lot.
Which I don't believe, by the way. It just seems pretty ridiculous at this point, all those cars blowing up.
They're like, we've got some money, let's blow shit up. So let's do it. Then Teasle does a public announcement. After noticing all the damage, he knows that the thing that, in essence, the bear he had poked has broken through from its cage, and it is now running free in his town. He does a public announcement, which clearly this must be a very small town if you can reach a lot of people with a public announcement. I grew up in a small town, Virginia. At the time, Dale City was a very small town when I grew up in the 1970s. It's a much bigger town now. We did not have an ability for someone to put a public announcement out for everybody to hear. So very interesting stuff. Teasle asks for people to clear the streets, and we see people running away and doing all this stuff. Then Troutman walks in and sees Teasle pulling rifles out of the cabinet, which Rambo had cased earlier in the film.
Why don't you forget what you're thinking and clear out what you can?
And I wrote, Teasle, ever the gentleman, tells Troutman to fuck off, and then calls him out for not knowing that Rambo might still be alive. And then Teasle tells Troutman, somewhat defiantly, but I think stupidly, that Rambo is not going to get out of this place.
Teasle, you and all your men couldn't handle him before. Now, what makes you think you can handle him now?
Teasle responds that it's his job and his town, and that he's not giving it up to Rambo or anyone else, and tells Troutman to stay the hell out of his way. So this is an interesting exchange here between the two men, because they just exchanged a drink in the bar and had a bit of a testy back and forth. And here we go with another testy back and forth. Teasle will not stand down. Even though Rambo, the terror that he's awoken, has come to visit him in his own home, Teasle won't stand down. Troutman is trying to talk logic into him, saying, like, look, I'm the only family he's got. I can get through them. Let me do this. And Teasle won't let it happen. The arrogance and the hubris of Teasle wanting to get revenge on Rambo here takes over, and it's such a mistake for what it leads to. What do you think? What do you think of this scene between the two of them?
So it's what's so great about this film is that it is a collision of masculinity.
Yeah,
you know,
100%. Yes,
you got all of these people who have been trained. Rambo has been trained. Teasle has built a career on not backing down. You cannot back down. You know, and this is certainly something that's in their internal monologues in the books all the time. And it's like, first of all, as we'd said before, Mitch was right. You just needed to listen to Mitch. And now Teasle should go.
Yeah.
Logically, we have obviously gotten into a thing that we don't understand. This has obviously gone to a place that's very dangerous for the whole town, for me, for a whole bunch of people, and for John Rambo. He should go to Troutman and go, okay, let's you and I work together.
Yeah.
That's what I have these resources of my town. We need to bring this guy in. We need to deal with this guy. You have all sorts of expertise. What would be your approach to settling Rambo down? And that would be how they could, and working together, they probably could bring him in, but neither of them can do that.
And Troutman would probably say to him, hey man, how can we get him out of here so both of us don't lose face? Right? That's the smarter move. Teasle goes to the roof of the sheriff's station to get a look at where Rambo might be. And I kind of like the direction that Ted Kotchoff does here. We are seeing everything that is happening. We are getting a bird's eye view. We're understanding the layout of the town and when Rambo is in relation to Teasle.
And I like, man, when he goes up on the roof, Teasle is clearly scared.
Oh, yeah. 100% he's scared. Yeah.
Yeah.
Taking the high ground, Steve. He's perched there with his rifle, surveying the town. We see Rambo, as I said just a few minutes ago, Rambo shoots out the power in one section of the town, and the town goes dark in that section. He's got an M60 now and shoots up a department store and shoots out the power in another section of town. Teasle keeps moving from one side of the roof to the next following the explosions, completely unsettled. Rambo finds a store called the Outpost, comes upon a cache of weapons and bullets, and clearly he wants to set off a massive explosion. He puts everything in the center of the store, has gunpowder leading out to where he is. And because, as Steve said, this is a masculine movie, he doesn't light it with a match. He shoots at the gunpowder to light it, and it explodes. And this explosion causes Teasle to poke his head out on the roof, and that's where Rambo sees him, and he shoots the sheriff's station up right underneath Teasle. Then slowly, Rambo goes up the stairs, walks into the sheriff's office, looks up, kind of casing where Teasle might be. Teasle sees Rambo, shoots him through the glass in the roof. And as Teasle gives away his position, Rambo runs across there, and he shoots Teasle through the roof, and Teasle falls through the roof onto the table there. So Brian Dennehy, because Stallone had done the stunt in the trees that actually broke his rib, Brian Dennehy wanted to do this stunt, did this stunt, and hurt himself terribly falling from that height on to that hard wooden or hard surface there, Steve. So it's crazy to me, right?
Well, that one in particular, look, Stallone's crazy and he's playing the action star.
Stallone's also much younger,
and in better shape. Stallone's in fantastic shape.
No offense to Mr. Dennehy at the time. Yes, right.
Look, I'm a big guy. I have total respect for Mr. Dennehy. He's awesome. And I watched him in a boxing ring in Gladiator. He seems like a very dangerous guy. So here's the thing that I just kind of figured out. You know what? I think this movie has within it the seeds of the problems in the sequels, because what's happening in that first half, because I'm sort of rethinking what I had said about the second half and the action sequences.
Okay.
There's so much tension built in the first half.
Yeah.
And what happens, because as you brought up, Jerry Goldsmith plays that triumphant music, that heroic theme. So now it's like, for lack of a better word, this is the orgasm you've been building to.
Yeah.
So when he opens fire with the M60 to blow up that, all those munitions, well, that is that we've had all this tension, and now we get the release of violence.
Yeah.
And that release of violence had all of us male high school kids at the time go, fuck yeah. And the fuck yeah of the movie, that is Rambo 2 and 3 and all is like, that's what we want. We want that moment of him with the M60. That's what felt so good. But what bought the power of the moment with the M60 is all of the tension in the setup that led us there. Yep. And then the later movies, they don't have any of that,
Right, which Stallone has admitted in numerous interviews. So he knows what made them work and what didn't make them work fully at the level of First Blood, which I appreciate from him as a creative and an artist.
Yeah.
But yeah, him shooting Teasle through the roof, very similar to the Die Hard moment when that Italian guy is shooting at McClane through the table, and then McClane eventually shoots him through the table and says, thanks for the tip or something like that. All right. So then as Teasle falls through the roof, we see that Rambo walk up to him and Teasle says,
Go ahead, you crazy son of a bitch! Finish Rambo!
Steve, why would Teasle want to die at the hands of Rambo in this moment? Why does he have a death wish in this moment? Why not just, rely on his mercy maybe, or maybe Troutman coming in, which he does in a second here, to save him? Why does he tell Rambo to kill him? Is this a masculinity thing as well?
This is my opinion of it, but okay. I think Teasle had built his entire identity on some bullshit.
Good point.
And Rambo exposed it all.
Right. He was a man. He was strong. He was tough. He was the toughest dude in town. And here comes Rambo and absolutely shows him how weak and soft he actually is.
And I would add one thing. I agree with all that. And the thing I'd add to it, you think you're in control.
Yeah.
Teasle thinks he's in control.
Right.
Rambo showed him, you are not in control. This is all fake. And so once your identity has been destroyed, you have nothing left. Kill me.
Yeah. Especially if you're not emotionally aware of yourself, the option to die in a situation like that seems logical in your mind, when in fact living is probably the better situation. Anyway, Troutman does stop Rambo just as Rambo is maybe considering the possibility of killing Teasle, tries to talk some sense into him, and points out that all the police are out there. And we see, great shot from Ted Kotcheff as the director, seeing all those police cars lined up right outside that window that has been shot out by Rambo. Troutman tells him that he can't possibly escape. And then he tells Johnny that the mission is over. And Rambo yells back at him, which I imagine Steve's going to just lay in this whole scene, but I'm going to go through it anyway. Rambo yells back at him,
"Nothing is over! Nothing! You just don't turn it off!"
And he launches into this great monologue about what a lot of Vietnam veterans suffered when they came back to the States after they were drafted and served in Vietnam. They took abuse from numerous people, as I said earlier in the first part, from both the left and the right. From the left, because they called them baby killers and they served in an unpopular war, and the right, because they lost the war. So there was a pride thing with a lot of people there. They spat on them, threw bags of feces on them.
Who are they to protest me, huh? Who are they? Unless they've been me and been there and know what the hell they're yelling about.
And Rambo talks about how useful he was in the battlefield and all the duties he had back then. And back here, he can't even hold a job. Parking cars! And then he finally breaks down in tears. And he starts to tell a story about Dan Forrest and all the things they do once they get back to the States. Now, this is a cliche thing that we've seen in other movies and made fun of in other movies. But in this movie, because of Stallone's performance, it really works. This is a Sylvester Stallone we've never seen at this point in his career in 1982. And he's just giving so much effort and love and attention to this monologue and reality.
Go in this bar in Saigon, and this kid comes up. This kid carrying a shoeshine box. And he says, "Shine, please, shine." I said, "No." He kept asking, "Yeah." And Joey said, "Yeah." And I went to get a couple of beers.
We find out that the shoeshine box was wired and it blew up. And he talks about trying to put his friend, who he was just talking to, trying to put him back together again, and that he was crying for help and that no one would help. And all Dan was saying was that he wanted to go home, but Rambo couldn't find his legs. Sorry, it's such a painful and incredible delivery and monologue here from Sylvester Stallone. Having served in the military, having talked to people in the military who have gone through this, it brings back that from his performance. And he breaks down. He's like, "I can't find his legs. I can't find his legs." There's just this kind of childish mania that is happening for him. And I don't mean childish in a negative way. I mean that he's reverting back to this kid who is essentially asking for his daddy because all this stuff has happened and he can't figure it out.
I can't get it out of my head. I do this 7 years. Every day it happens. Sometimes I wake up, I don't know where I am. I don't talk to anybody. Sometimes a day. Sometimes a week. I can't put it out of my mind.
Troutman takes us all in. As you said, Steve, which is a really important part of this movie, is the silences, right? Troutman lets him go, doesn't say anything, doesn't interrupt him. He's taken this all in, and he doesn't walk over to Rambo as maybe nowadays someone might do that, scripted to do that. He takes it and he waits and then walks over to him. And Rambo, as I said, almost like a child, sad and desperate and needing someone, takes his hand and pulls Troutman down and hugs him. What's really great about Richard Crenna's performance here is he does not bend down to hug Rambo. He puts his arm around Rambo and pats him, but he stays rigid. He stays strong because that's who Troutman is in his mind, and he cannot give that to Rambo. And Rambo is hugging him and crying and just this a bunch of stuff that's just pouring out of him. Troutman puts his hand on his back, but never leans down. And then we cut to Rambo being led out in handcuffs by the state police, stopping to see Teasle being put into an ambulance. And as he's walking to the car, for a little bit, we see the credits start to roll up on the screen. And then both Rambo and Troutman turn to their right, and it stops there. And we hear Dan Hill's It's a Long Road, which is one of the cheesiest songs, but great lyrics that really reflect what's going on in the movie.
It's a long road when you're on your own.
It plays as we pause on him, and then the screen goes to black, and that's the end of First Blood. So, Steve, I know I ran through that entire scene, but really it's just a massive final scene for this movie that reveals so much about Rambo's point of view and about the relationship that him and Troutman have. What do you think about this, all the way from Troutman stopping him from killing Teasle and the conversation that eventually happens and Rambo breaking down and delivering this monologue to let Troutman know what his people have suffered since he took off and kind of left them alone?
Well, first of all, I love that we never really get to know if Rambo would have killed Teasle or not.
Yeah, right.
And my gut is he would not have.
I agree. I don't think he would have either. Yes.
Because it's not that Rambo hasn't killed people, he has. But I don't think, particularly in the conception of this character in this film, that Rambo is a cold-blooded killer and would kill a helpless person, even if he hates that person. I'm sorry to say, mixed feelings about this monologue.
Ooh, really? This is interesting. Please,
And I love everything that's said in the monologue.
Mm-hmm.
And there are moments, particularly, the moment that you describe, that is so moving of, I can't find his legs. I can't find your legs. I mean, that's just crushing. And so many of the things are literally what I've heard veterans talking about, particularly, I mean, it's not the most emotional at all, but I ran $1 million equipment and now I can't get a job parking cars.
Right.
I mean, that's for real going on right now with veterans coming home today that they have, because my experience with veterans, because I taught a lot because of the GI Bill in my film classes, they were almost always the most responsible, organized guys in my classes because they had to be. Whereas the kids that were fresh out of high school, they were fuck ups.
Yeah.
And these veterans were amazing. So like that, I really respect that. I think there's a thing that we had to teach my son, which was if he eats something when he was a little kid and he didn't like it, he'd go, yuck, that's terrible. And we would say, look, I just cooked that for you. So that was kind of not so nice. So we would prefer that you would say, it's not to my taste.
Yeah.
And so we taught that. And what I'll say is, like, me, I tend to like more restrained emotional performances. And I think Stallone went full on, like that was the choice that he made.
Yeah.
And to me, it's a little, it takes me out of the movie a little bit because it's so full on.
Takes you out of the movie?
Yep. That's look, I am certain that 95% of people will disagree with me.
Wow.
But for me in this moment, I get taken out a little bit. But I like everything he has to say, and it gets really moving, as I said, at the same point that you were talking about, that is really powerful. And it is, and I also say the song at the end of the film, it is the perfect cheesy song.
Oh, and no, it really is.
It hits exactly in the sweet spot of cheese for this film.
I mean, Dan Hill has one of the best 1980s voices ever. And so many of these action films have these kinds of songs at the end, right?
Yeah.
John Parr, Greg Allman. There were a number of 80s guys. John Waite sometimes There are a number of these 80s guys who had fantastic. Robert Tepper, No Way Out. No, Easy Way Out, rather, in Rocky IV. So clearly this is something that appeals to Stallone, these gravelly voiced guys singing stuff at the end of their movies. It's funny you say this about the monologue, because the monologue is so incredible to me. It is the calling card of the movie for me. I don't think the movie works without it. I really don't. You need to have him break down. You need to see just all the walls are down now, finally, once and for all. And you see this scared little kid that was 17 years old, signed up for the army, and was turned into this killing machine by Troutman. So he reverts back to being this kid again, this childish teenager, because that was the end of his emotional growth. He's an emotionally stunted person. And that's the place that he goes to finally when all the pressure of everything Teasle's done to him, the death of his friend at the beginning of the movie, the death of all the other people that have been part of this, the fact that he can't hold a job, all of it comes crashing down on him in this moment. This was his defiance, his moment of rebellion, all of this to show the pain and destruction that is going on inside of him, to show it out outwardly with everything he does to the town. And so his breakdown for me is just such an essential part of the movie, and everything has built up to that breakdown. So although it does not work for you, for me, it really, really does, man.
Honestly, I agree with everything you've said. I think my reaction to that monologue says more about me than it says about the movie.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I don't like, I mean, I came from a family that, you know, I never saw my dad lose his temper in my entire life.
Right.
You know, like my mom didn't yell. Like there was I come from a very emotionally calm family. And I mean, I don't lose my temper easily. And
No,
I
you
don't.
Right. True.
And so like, it's just, I don't like that, you know? And so my aesthetic, and if you look at everything I've ever written and every film I've ever made, they don't go to that particular kind of emotional place, because I don't go to that particular kind of emotional place.
Enough.
But that's what I say is like, everything you said is correct. And that's why I think it says more about me than it says about the film.
Well, one of the things Stallone said about this particular performance is he said in this monologue that he has had these rare moments on film where he has left his body and he surrendered himself to the role. And he said, this is one of those moments and one of the scenes in film where he completely left his body and just let the emotion of the role take him over and deliver the performance that he does in that monologue, which I think is one of the greatest performances he's ever delivered in any scene in his entire career. You know?
He's never done anything else like it. I mean,
there's shades of it in Copland, and there's shades of it in Rocky Balboa when he's talking to Paulie about the stuff inside.
Yeah.
There are moments, but nothing to this extent, Steve. You're absolutely right. There are moments of it, though, for sure. All right, so that's the end of First Blood. Let's get into some end movie notes here. First Blood was Sylvester Stallone's first non-Rocky movie, which did not bomb. It is also the first film where Rambo does not use a bow and arrow, which becomes his calling card, starting with Rambo First Blood Part 2. It was originally budgeted at $11 million. It came in closer to $17 million, with the production running several months late. It topped the U.S. box office for 3 weeks in a row. Its $6.6 million on opening weekend was the best October opening at the time ever. And the film ended as a significant financial success with a gross of $51 million domestically, and it grossed $125 million worldwide against a $15 million budget. So it took 10 years to get here, Steve, but what a return on your investment. It was the first major Hollywood blockbuster to be released in China, where it was released in 1985. It sold 76 million tickets in China, which was the record all the way up until 2018.
Wow.
That's incredible. It has an 86% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes with an average rating of 7.2 out of 10. And this is an interesting thing about Rambo. I want to throw this in. Sylvester Stallone believes that the character and the legacy of Rambo has been represented. Rambo has been taken on as a very pro-military, patriotic symbol for America's strength. Stallone feels the character is the exact opposite of this. So it's very funny to see certain people in military quarters think Rambo is representative of this belief that the military is the way to do things. Rambo is actually the opposite of that. And we see that in comics now, Steve, as some people have taken that Punisher symbol and don't understand what the Punisher actually stood for and meant and use it to mean something completely different. Another thing to give here is an interesting part. Rambo's knife. I want to throw this in. In a 2011 article for Blade magazine by Mark Carter, credit is given to David Morrell and the Rambo films for revitalizing the cutlery industry in the 1980s due to the presence of the Jimmy Lyle and Gil Hibben knives that are used in the film. Stallone specifically sought out Jimmy Lyle to build a knife for Rambo for the film. So that's not a knife they found on the shelf. It was designed for the film back in 1982. And David Morrell received an Industry Achievement Award in 2003 from Blade magazine. This was the first time that a Rocky film and a Rambo film were released the same year in 1982. Rocky 3 was in 1982, and as well as First Blood. The second time that a Rocky film and a Rambo film came out in the same year was 1985 when Rocky IV and First Blood Part 2 were released together. This is one of the top 10 most rented video titles ever in Betamax format. It was the 13th highest grossing film of 1982. Now, it didn't get nominated for any awards or anything like that, but it has constantly been cited as one of the greatest movies of the 1980s and has showed up on a number of top lists, both in Britain and the United States, in the top 500 movies ever made or top 250 movies ever made. And that's an incredible legacy for a film that probably not a lot of people expected a lot from, and only clocks in at a tight 93 minutes, but has left quite an indelible impression in a lot of quarters for film goers and in multiple generations, I believe.
I think, I'm just repeating the thing that I said at the beginning, which is the difference between the sequels and the original film, and the difference between the conception of the character of John Rambo as this is all about the military being awesome, and the reality of the film First Blood, which actually brings up, John, we have a Patreon question about this film. And this question comes from Eric Krems, and he says, do you think that the quality and quantity of sequels in the Rambo series has had a negative impact on the legacy of First Blood? It never gets the acclaim of Deer Hunter, American Sniper, or Born on the 4th of July, and I think the examination of PTSD and reassimilation are just as poignant. First Blood seems to just get lumped into the 80s action thriller bucket. What do you think?
I think you should find better friends to be friends with, man, because I don't think I've ever heard from any of my friends who are film lovers lumping First Blood into just a regular old action film. I think anybody who has seen the film and understands what the film is all about puts it in a separate place. I don't think it's on the level of The Deer Hunter or Apocalypse Now. I would say it's better than Born on the 4th of July, in my personal opinion. Don't confuse length with epic. Don't confuse that. And I think there's a lot more going on in Stallone's First Blood than there is in Born on the 4th of July. So I think it certainly deserves a higher praise than that. And I don't think the film suffers in comparison to the other installments. I think just like The Matrix, people revere The Matrix. And although Reloaded sucks, Revolution sucks, whatever, they all weren't great. But The Matrix is still revered as a film that changed science fiction forever. I think this film, 1982's First Blood, is still a film that people revere because of the commentary on Vietnam veterans. And it did change people's points of views. And talking to or reading and researching on this, a lot of Vietnam veterans credit the film with finally highlighting what they were experiencing, and that the country's attitude didn't change until much later with the 2001 wars, the Desert Storm, all of that. It caused a reappreciation of Vietnam veterans, and the film is cited as being a part of making that happen when we went into the Gulf to have that war there in 2001. So I think the film has a lot more legacy for the right people who understand what the film is all about. That's my answer to that.
Well, I agree, but I actually think his point is well taken, because what I think he's saying is that did the way that the sequels happen change people's opinion of the first movie because they think it's more like the sequels? Like your example of The Matrix, I don't think, as much as those later movies aren't good, I don't think they tarnish The Matrix at all.
Yeah.
I think The Matrix still stands alone. But I think if you say, hey, what do you think of Rambo? A lot of people's brains go to all the sequels more maybe than they go to First Blood. Well,
I think there's two questions. Do you ask them, what do you think of Rambo? That's a separate conversation. What do you think of First Blood?
Right.
I think the reactions might be different.
Yeah. Because I think, if I think of Rambo First Blood Part 2 or whatever the third one was, I do lump them in with cheesy 80s action movies.
Yeah, those absolutely. Yes, 100%.
But I don't have. I personally revere First Blood, but I do wonder if like that the other movies diluted the love of First Blood because of what they became. You know.
That'd be something for our fans to chime in on. So certainly let's hear from you all. Do you think it diluted it or not? Or do you think it still stands head and shoulders as one of the best films from the 1980s and one of the best action films because it has something really powerful to say? Well, Steve, we've gotten to the end of this discussion of First Blood. This has been such a blast to revisit this film with you. What are your final thoughts on First Blood?
This has been so much fun, John. And it's and I have to put my final thoughts into two groups. Group number one is I've just loved you taking me on this journey. It's been so much fun doing it. It was pressure
packed. It was pressure packed.
Look, it's describing a whole movie is not an easy task. And it was great to hear your description, particularly because it's obviously a movie that you love so much, you know, and I could not have done nearly as good a job passionately describing this movie as you do because this is your movie, you know.
Thank you, man.
The John Rambo of this film I love. When I say I love him, it's not like he'd be my buddy and I want to hang out with John Rambo.
Yeah, right.
It's that I have deep, profound sympathy for this character and for his pain, starting right off in that opening scene when he realizes his friend is dead and the pain of that. And I also see it's such a classic tragedy in that we're just heading towards disaster. You know, like as soon as Romeo sees Juliet, we know we're heading for disaster.
Yep.
And not that this is a romantic film, but the moment that the sheriff drives him across that bridge and he says, "Why are you pushing me?" Yeah. And then Rambo turns around and walks back into town. We know we're heading for tragedy. And that's how this movie plays for me. And it is a great action movie, but it's the drama and the character that really is what makes it powerful for me.
Yeah, my final thoughts on this one are when you come across these films, you can have a tendency to dismiss them, especially action films, to push them out. It's a 90 minutes, whatever. But if you take time to look at certain ones that stand out above the other action films, you'll see that there's a lot here. We already talked about Joseph Campbell in this part and the hero's journey that Rambo goes on in this movie. Really incredible. Hard to believe that it's something like that would be in this film. It influenced, but it was. But also, I take Stallone's words. He sees Rambo as Frankenstein's monster. And that Troutman is Frankenstein. So now we have shades to one of the great literary classics in Frankenstein. So there is so much here that we may unconsciously or subconsciously be connecting to without knowing, but we just know that it's good. And that's what I like about this movie. It takes its time laying the groundwork for what's going on with all of its characters. It's setting what's going on with at the time in our country and what is happening here in this battle between Teasle and Rambo. And we can see why one would go one way, why one would go the other way. And I think Steve says it perfectly. It's a tragedy all around. No one leaves this situation unscarred by what happened here and deals with these scars for the rest of their lives because it is such a traumatic situation that goes down in this town of Hope, Washington. So it's a wonderful film, incredibly well directed, phenomenally well acted, well written as well. And it still stands tall as one of the greatest 1980s films. And I was very honored to be able to lead the discussion on the Cine-Files. And I hope all of you listening to us enjoy the discussion as well and gave me a little grace to lead this when it's usually Steve who's leading it for sure. So thank you, Steve, for being very kind to step aside and let me lead this one because I love this film so much.
Thank you. And it definitely was not kindness. It was a benefit for me. So I really, really like that you did it. So that is what we think of First Blood. Of course, we'd love to hear your thoughts. You can visit us on our Facebook page where we love to read your comments. You can go to Twitter where it's Cine_Files. It's Cine-Files Podcast on Instagram. We'd love to see your comments and reactions there. Please subscribe to the show if you haven't already done so at Apple Podcasts, at YouTube, Spotify, Stitcher. Leave your reviews on Apple Podcasts. I think last week we said that we would read the next 5-star review that comes along, and we will read the next one after that too. So That's 2 5-star reviews we'll read. And if we get 100 5-star reviews, well, we're going to have to pick the best ones then. If you want to buy or stream First Blood along with every other film we've ever reviewed, you can do so at Cine-Files.net. And you can support the show and even ask questions like we had today of upcoming films at patreon.com/the Cine-Files. All sorts of exciting things going on there. And if you want to reach me, you can do it on SR Morris on Twitter, SR Morris1 on Instagram. And I just found out that my Great White Shark film that I mentioned in this podcast that has Mike Hoover, who I described my issues with him, is now actually available for free on YouTube. And nobody told me 6 months ago when they put it on YouTube, even though I am the director. But I'm very excited that it's now available for free. It looks great. Check out Great White Shark Beyond the Cage of Fear on YouTube. John, how would folks find you?
You can find me at The Roca Says on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, The Outlaw Nation on Twitch, my YouTube channel, youtube.com/John Roca Says, and my podcasts, The Geek Buddies and The Hot Mic, that are out there for you all to enjoy. My other podcasts for you all to enjoy. And maybe Steve and I will do a watch along of Beyond the Cage of Fear, which would be a lot of fun to maybe put that up for our patrons to watch as well. And if you're not a member of the Patreon, you need to become a member of the Patreon. Head on over to patreon.com/the Cine-Files. See all the tiers that work. The advisory council has been fantastic. There's so many great things we're offering to you all. So please don't hesitate to come be a part of our Patreon. We'd love to have you. All right, and there you go. And for my partner, Steve Morris, I am the Outlaw John Roca. This has been the Cine-Files. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.